Good morning, Maximizers. Jessica. Just hopping on here today because I had shared with several Maximizers that I was going to be doing a very transparent and vulnerable 12-month review of my 12 months using the Maxximize Planner. Because I am the only person who has had a full year of using the Maxximize Planner, and because I just released the tool to the public in January of 2020. So, before we kind of get into the kind of just going over 12 months of what this experience has been like for me, I'd just like to point out that when I first started this thing 12 months ago, I had no idea that it was going to become what it is today. I started this journey just for me at a time in my life when everything felt really out of control. And I recognized the need to become more organized. I've always kind of been an organized person, but I needed to not just be organized, I think, physically in my physical space, but I needed to be more organized mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. I'm just going to add a little note in here that I'm recording this video in my home office, and my husband is sitting next to me making all kinds of noises that are distracting me with his rollerball mouse and his tapping on the keys. However, I'm going to exercise the practice of allowing, which I have learned through meditation, and I'm not going to get myself distracted. So, but I thought I would let you know in case you're like hearing the tapping or the rolling of the key. We are obviously in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic. Everyone is home together. My family is no different than I'm sure yours. We're all finding a way to work or go to school and coexist from the comforts of our home. So, I would also just like to point out or take a moment to say that, this is not easy, I don't think, for any of us. I am a psychotherapist and I work with a lot of people who are experiencing on, some pretty wide scale anxiety based on fear of the unknown and the uncertainty that we're experiencing during this time. And you know what? I'm no different than anyone that I'm working with right now from home, teletherapy through my computer screen. And I'm being pretty transparent about that, I always self-disclose that I have anxiety and I have had to learn how to manage that for my entire life. And I would say 12 months ago when I started this practice, I was kind of in a place of like really out of control, super raging anxiety that manifested in a lot of different ways. And it's funny because my husband and I were having a conversation just a couple of days ago about how you never know how something you start doing or how something that happens to you is actually preparing you or shaping you for something in your future. And, I felt like, and it kind of dawned on me that a year ago when I started this journey, none of us could have predicted that we would be in a global pandemic, where, the whole world is quarantining and going through this experience together. But, a year ago, the last year of my life, I feel like I have been preparing for this, learning how to better manage my thoughts, my emotions, my anxiety, my fear, because that is what anxiety is. It's fear-based thinking. And then it manifests into, I think psychosomatic forms, physical forms, and then behavioral forms. So yeah, when I started this journey 12 months ago, I had no idea that it was preparing me for what's happening in my life right now. And, I don't say this, and I recognize that saying this feels a bit privileged, right? That I'm going to say, I feel okay. There are times, yes, when my thinking goes to those places of uncertainty or fear or of the what if, or, in all of those places. But I have the mechanisms now to pretty quickly identify when I'm doing that and be able to kind of bring it back, reframe, refocus on what's in my mental, emotional, and, physical control. And there's a lot right now that none of us can control. But there is also a lot that we can control. And so it's about always bringing it back into, I think, your sphere of influence, your sphere of control. And I think that starts with mental and emotional strength, right? So it starts with mental strength, becoming mentally strong. It's like building your mental armor so that you're not so impacted emotionally, and then your behaviors, decisions, judgments, whatever, don't take on that fear-based shape. So I am going to share, you guys, where I was a year ago. Actually, the end of March 31st was my final day of my 12th month of using the Maxximize Planner. So I am now in my 13th month, starting my second year's journey of using this tool to manifest the things that I want to happen in my life. And before I do that, I do believe that, and to be intentional, it is important to always be reflecting, and that's a huge practice built into the Maxximize Planner, which is reflecting at the end of your week, reflecting at the end of your month. And now I've added, and I haven't done this for all of you, but I probably will when it comes to the November-December tool, because that would be the 12th month for those of you who have used it for all of 2020, to do your own 12-month review, to see where you're at, to see how things have taken on new shape or new form in your life. But right now, because I'm the only one who's done 12 months, I'm gonna start with me. And I'm gonna be pretty raw and transparent, so I hope that you guys are kind. Don't judge me more than I judge myself. I don't think anybody judges anybody more than we judge ourselves. We are our harshest critic, our harshest, that's where I'll leave that. But, okay, I'm gonna go into it. I'm gonna rip off the Band-Aid. So, starting April 1st of 2019, through March 31st of 2020 was my 12-month period. This is where, so actually, let me give you guys an idea of where I was at that time in my life, like what was going on, what were the circumstances. So, we had just moved into a new apartment. We have moved a lot since we came to California 5 years ago. And we made the decision to move because the year before we had moved into a new apartment to accommodate my brother who moved here from the East Coast. And, we thought we could make it work and give him kind of a start to just kind of get himself set up here. And so we moved from our 2-bedroom apartment in one area to a 3-bedroom apartment. But this 3-bedroom apartment was on a 2nd story. And of course, when you have a kid, a 7-year-old, he was maybe 6 at the time. God, it's a couple years ago now. 6, they're very active. They jump, they run, they are clunky in their steps, and they're making lots of noise. and apartment buildings are not not very good with sound. So we were getting a lot of noise complaints, and that was causing me to have a lot of stress. I kind of turned into like the noise police at home constantly with my son. So I felt constantly guilty that I was like preventing him from just being a kid all the time because of this living environment that we were in. Not to mention, you know, sometimes we have the best of intentions going into something, but it's like, boy, if we could go back knowing what we know now, we probably wouldn't have made those decisions. And, you know, my relationship with my brother over time started to kind of break down. And it wasn't a very comfortable living space. And I know it ended very poorly. I won't say ended, right? Because, I mean, he's my brother. He's still in my life. But that time ended very, very badly. I have a lot of actual, you know, I don't regret a lot of things in my life. I guess it was a learning opportunity. But, you know, there's definitely some things that I wish I could go back and do differently. In regards to sort of how that period between my brother and I ended. But we can't go back, right? We can only go forward. And so we had left that, we had moved into yet a new apartment. Also kind of around that time, my relationship with my best friend of 15 years also fell apart. And, you know, that was really hard because I considered her my other half, family, and one day she just wasn't in my life anymore, just out of the blue. I guess it wasn't really out of the blue if we both are honest. But, you know, that's what was happening. I was grieving, and kind of coming out of some grief from that, but feeling very lonely. And I also, during that time, I'm trying to think back now, our whole family had the flu. We all had the flu. My son actually got pneumonia and a double ear infection, and it was just kind of like the perfect storm kind of brewing all around. And I just know my whole life just felt super chaotic and out of control. And I was out of control, right? And I'm going to share all the ways that I was out of control in my habits. Because I think when we feel out of control, we try to cope, or we tend to reach for things that we think are going to help, but they don't really help. They either allow us to escape or avoid, but they're not necessarily helping us mentally, emotionally, or physically. And they're not promoting us forward in any way. They're keeping us stuck and rooted in kind of the muck of it. So I will kind of go into a lot of the habits that I had when I first started using the Maxximize Planner, which was not called the Maxximize Planner. It was actually, you know what, I think I've already showed this to you guys, but let me go and get it. You know, I started with this notebook, and I just kind of like started mapping out. I decided, you know, I've used planners my whole life. I've never had one that really met my needs, all my needs. It was more just about the day-to-day or like planning my week. And the Maxximize Planner, if you use it, you know, is very different from just your typical planner. So I started with this, just kind of like figuring out like bullet journaling. And kind of having some fun with it. I do have this creative side that I feel like as an adult I don't bring out enough in my life, and I figured we're all at home, everybody's sick, there's nothing else to do, kind of like what we're going through right now, and I just got creative, and I said, you know what, instead of going to buy a planner for this year, I am going to make my own. And you know, I had also just finished listening to Rachel Hollis's new book at the time, Girl Stop Apologizing, and that had a profound impact on getting me started, right? It kind of gave me like the launch pad for like figuring out a few of the parts of where I would start with this. Okay, so now that you kind of get a little bit of a picture of what was going on in my life at that time, I'm going to also give you some more details, the raw details of specific habits and that took shape over time. So number one, I had no intentionally directed morning or evening routine. And I've talked about that in my routines video on the website. And I just like woke up chaotic and I went to bed, you know, feeling unresolved. And, you know, that's what added to a lot of sleeping issues. I had no intentional system for hydrating myself. So I think I've talked about this before too. I was kind of low level, chronically dehydrated because I definitely did not drink enough water back then. And I'm gonna drink some coffee now because I love coffee. I had very high anxiety and fear-based thinking. I never meditated. Meditation was one of those things that I was like, yeah, I know it's probably good for me, but that's not for me. I'm a mover. I'm a doer. Like, I don't sit, like that kind of thing. I was at my heaviest weight that was pretty equivalent to the weight that I was at when I was 9 months pregnant. I was 184 pounds and a size 14 extra large, approaching a size 16. You know, and this isn't to judge anyone who is that size, but I know for me, that didn't feel good for me. That was not where I felt happy in my body. So that contributed a lot to my just like overall yuckiness. I had no intentional gratitude practice. I did not think too much about gratitude or, you know, expressing gratitude or searching for gratitude or appreciation in my life. I was extremely uncomfortable in my own skin due to not feeling like right in my body because of my size, and my clothes did not fit. So I was a terrible sleeper and I never felt rested, ever. I don't even know if I ever had like a full night's sleep. You know, I think I've shared this in other videos as well, where I would do this thing where it would take me a really long time to fall asleep, and then I would get to sleep, but then I would wake up at like 3 o'clock in the morning and my brain was just awake, just kind of like mulling over everything and anything it could possibly attach to. And, you know, so I just never felt rested. I hated getting ready or dressed because none of my clothes fit anymore. I had gained so much weight. And, you know, it sounds like, oh, well, why didn't you go out and buy new clothes? Because it's no fun to shop when you have to buy larger sizes and try on so many things that you just don't. I know that there are a lot of people, men and women alike. I think that, you know, this is just not a woman problem. This is a man problem too. I think men can also relate. They're just not as vocal about this aspect of their life. But it's no fun to put on clothes when you don't feel like they are comfortable or they don't fit you well or you don't look good in them. I lacked confidence and I had very low self-esteem. I think there was just a lot going on in my life where I knew there was a lot that I could have been doing differently, but I didn't at that time. I don't think that it's that I didn't know how. It was my ego telling me, you don't have to do that right now. And I listened every time. So I barely exercised, and when I did, it was pretty few and far between. I drank alcohol almost daily to cope with feelings of overwhelm, depression, and anxiety. I ate my feelings to cope with the anxiety and the depression, right? When we reach for those external things that we think are going to make us feel better or numb us or, you know, create some joy in the moment, but then later they just end up ruining everything. I felt angry, irritated, sad, or frustrated most of the time. I had very low tolerance to manage these negative emotions, triggering a lot of ego-based and reactive thinking, maladaptive coping and behaving, like the drinking or eating all the time. I had declined relationships, as I shared with you earlier, either out of neglect, projection, or pushing others away. I watched TV daily or played games on my phone to relax, but really just to escape. I felt like a failure on most days, that I was letting others down. But mostly I know that I was letting myself down. And I projected that onto other people. Sorry. That was always a tough one to get through. Okay. I had a low sex drive and neglected sex life, which left feelings of disconnect from my husband. In the beginning, I was in the beginning of my self-employment journey. That was the part that I forgot to mention before, setting the stage for where I was at. I was in the beginning of my self-employment journey and doing psychotherapy and private practice. I was working to build my customer and client base, and it was slow. I was seeing on average only 10 to 12 patients a week, and I was chronically stressed out about finances because that was not enough to contribute to my family in the way that we needed. I knew that I wasn't bringing enough to help contribute to the needs, and I was adding this burden onto my husband, and that felt really icky. I was earning on average $2,400 to $2,800 a month, and I know maybe some people are thinking, wow, that's not so bad, but you know, we all have differences in what our needs are, and our life, you know, that we had created needed more than that coming in. I was grateful for each month that it, you know, kept rising, but it felt like it took a while for it to get to a point where it was like, wow, I can cover everything I need to cover this month, and not go to my husband and say, hey, can you buy this round of groceries? Or hey, can you put gas in my car? Or hey, I can't cover this. I know that I said that was my responsibility, but I just can't do it right now. Those things, every time I had to do that, it was just like another little cut to my self-confidence, self-esteem, and it allowed my ego to come back in a force, right? And remind me that I was a failure, that I wasn't doing enough, right? I was diving deeper and deeper into debt just to survive each month, definitely relying on credit cards a lot more. Feeling worse and worse each month, our debt tolls rose, and how this negatively contributed to our credit score and our ability to buy a home. You know, we've been in California for 5 years, and we have not been able to buy a house yet. And it's something that is very important to us, and we are working to get there. But at that time, it was like, it felt hopeless. I hung on to resentment, anger, and blame, which I projected at family, friends, and anywhere. I guess I could fling that stuff back instead of looking in here. I allowed fear to engage sabotaging behavior that if I hadn't begun using the Maxximize Planner, I would have undoubtedly triggered the old patterns of fight and flight in my career, right? I would have given up. I would have said, this is too hard. I'm just going to go find a job that will pay me, you know, a salary, and I'll have benefits. But I've been there. I've done that 500 times. Well, maybe not 500 actually, but I've done that, and I've never been happy. I've never been able to make that work either. So for me, it just kind of kept reminding myself, like, you're going to get there. It just takes time. But that was really hard. Basically, my entire life felt out of control. So I felt overwhelmed, hopeless, and again, like I said, out of control. I allowed other people's opinion of me to have a large presence on how I viewed myself. My anxiety caused me to be overly controlling of others, leaving them feeling resentful, defeated, or that they could never satisfy my incredibly high expectations. I never felt like I was making any real progress towards my life goals. The illusion of no money and no time to do all the things in my life was very strong. I felt like no one understands me. I'm different. I'm alone. I complained constantly to anybody who would listen, even my brother's dog, Jack. I vibrated at a very low energy frequency, which at the time I would not have had the words to even be able to put that sentence together. But in this last year's journey, I like know that that's where I was at, because I've learned a lot about energy and kind of that the universe's energy and how it takes shape and how it manifests on, you know, the inside, and then how that dictates what's happening on the outside in our relationships and our careers and our finances, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so those are the nitty-gritty raw details of where I was when I started the Maxximize Planner, which back then was not what it is now. I have shared before that it was month by month, you know, just kind of getting in and putting together the things that I felt like collectively or synergistically worked to not only create increased awareness, but allowed for a level of focus and intention on the areas of my life that needed it. And I've shared with you too that my first goal, and I encourage most users who start with it, that I started with health, right? That was my foundation for the year, is if I just focus on this one thing of I am in exceptional health. And when I say exceptional health, that means mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and financially. Financial is a huge part of our health journey. And so that was where I set my focus for year number one. And out of that, I cultivated, you know, just a really intense focus on that. And I am really grateful that I did, because in the last year, I'm going to now kind of go in and I have more pages on, you know, how all of this worked together to create where I am now. And it's I think I'm even a little dumbfounded at how, I don't know if it was easy, right? Because it's not easy. I think the things that I did were simple, but I think that the thing with simple is that the things that are simple to do are also simple not to do. And our ego, if our egos are really strong and we don't know that our egos are that strong and how it's taking shape and form and, you know, convincing us not to do those simple things, we often choose not to do them, or we rationalize or justify why we don't need to do them, or we can do them later, or blah, 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 right? So I would say, you know, this was really more than anything else. You guys, I will share that this understanding of our mind, you know, and here's the thing, it's not just my mind, it's your mind, it's everyone's mind works the same way. Everyone's mind works and operates on the same level. It's just that some of us are more aware and more intentional about how to, and we've developed strategies or practices to manage it. And that is what I've done over the last year. I have become mentally strong or mentally aware of noticing how much my ego sabotaged my life, sabotaged my self-confidence, sabotaged the direction that I've always wanted to go, but I have never been able to get there. Because I wasn't aware of this practice. I wasn't aware that this was happening behind the scenes of my mind. And so, you know, I'll just give you one example, and I think I've done this before, but I'm going to do it again just for the, you know, for the benefit of kind of really sinking in how I've been able to kind of manage this. we think about getting up in the morning, right? It's like the alarm clock goes off at whatever time it goes off. And most of us, if we're being honest, set the alarm clock a little earlier than what we really need to get up. And the intentional purpose behind that, which is actually subconscious because I don't think you're acting intentionally, but it's just like, oh, this is what I'm going to do because then I know I can hit snooze 1 or 2 times before I actually have to get up. Well, I was definitely one of those people. And so when the alarm clock goes off and your brain immediately goes, oh, you don't have to get up right now. You still have another half an hour. Lay back down. It's warm. Stay here, don't worry, like it's going to go off again in 15 minutes or in 30 minutes. It's okay. And guess what? You listen to that voice. You listen to it. You actually prepared yourself to listen to it by setting the alarm, 2 cycles before you actually had to get up. So then you stay in bed, right? But then what happens when it goes off the second time you hit snooze, you fall back to sleep, and then it goes off again, and now you're like, oh shit, I'm out of time. Right? I'm out of time. I got to get up. And now what's happening? Now you're rushing, right? Now what's happening inside your brain? You're probably not paying attention, actually. However, if you were to really think about it now, if you just kind of like even take a moment to realize how you woke up this morning, or, maybe not right now because I know we're in COVID and life's a little different than normal, but think back to that time. And it's like, then you're like, oh my God, I slept too late. I should have got up earlier, right? And like, oh my gosh, now I'm resting. Now I don't have time to do this. And now you're yelling at the kids and you're saying, hurry up. And right. And the anxiety is kicking in, but it's kicking in. And then also your ego is berating you and belittling you and tearing you down for making the choice that, 30 minutes ago, it said it was okay. It said it was okay to do that. So this is just one example in our lives of what this looks like, right? This happens all day long, all day long. And it's about becoming aware of this process, this kind of like push, pull, shove, whatever it is. And it's like waking up to this process happening in our minds and being like, oh yeah, that is happening. Oh, I don't have to listen to this thing rationalizing and justifying why it's okay to do this in the moment because I know that's not the best choice, right? I know that I should just get up. I will feel better if I just get up this morning, and then I won't feel rushed. Maybe I'll have a better interaction with my kids. I'll have a less stressful commute to work, right? And so it's like, then you're like, okay, I'm not gonna push snooze. I'm gonna get up. And you realize like, wow, and then you know what the magic part of that is? Your ego doesn't have anything to come back to you and tear you down for. Doesn't have anything to say. It's like you silence it. And that's a really important practice that I think, it is the most important practice, or the most important, I think, enlightenment that I learned in this 1-year journey. And I am very aware of this happening throughout my day. So let me go into a little bit about where I am today and what my habits are. So as you know, the Maxximize Planner has an intentional morning and evening routine section set up, and that's encouraged, or well, it is part of using the Maxximize Planner. It's one of the first places we begin, is designing our morning and evening routines, because how we wake up and how we go to bed are 2 of the most vital decisions that we can make in any given day. And so I have an intentional morning and evening ritual and routine. And my morning routine is so coveted. I crave it. I love it. I've shared with you guys before, I'm not a morning person. I still don't think I can identify as a morning person. It's never easy for me to get up and get out of bed. But now I notice I have stronger positive emotion attached with just get up, go sit in your chair, go enjoy your morning routine than I have with staying in bed, then having my ego come back and tell me things like, oh, you're so lazy, you know, you shouldn't have done, right? Like beating me up and tearing me down. That doesn't feel good. And I've recognized that pattern, and I'm like, I don't want that anymore. So I get up, I get out of bed. I've created a morning routine that I love so much, right? And that's individualized, I think, for everyone. I've shared in my morning routine video what that looks like. And I love that time. It's one of the things actually right now that I feel like it's a little hard because, right, we're all home, and typically during the work week, my son and my husband, Charlie and Chris, would be gone, and I would have the whole house to be quiet, and it's like this really nice time. And right now it's like it's harder and harder to find that quiet, kind of reflective, peaceful time. I got up the other morning at 7 thinking like, you know, Chris has been sleeping pretty late. Charlie's been going to bed a little later, so he's been sleeping later. And I opened my bedroom door, and there's Charlie sitting at his computer with checking his s'more newsletter for his, you know, day, which I was proud because, like, he's doing the right things. He had every light on in the house, and I'm like, dude, what are you doing up? Like, you're not supposed to be up right now. Like, this is my time. But anyways, you know, these are just kind of some of the little things that we have to smile about, right? Like, we have to laugh. And so, you know, it was like, okay, well, this is mommy's time, so you need to find something to do that's quiet. Which, I don't know that 8.5-year-olds have that capacity to be quiet.